Day. My name is Ashley Poling from COS Systems. This is actually our third Open Access Day, and we're incredibly thrilled to see the event grow, as well as the model in the United States. I want to just thank everybody in the room for being here, including our partners. So if you get a chance, please stop by. They've got little pop-ups outside. We're incredibly grateful to be in this room today, full of our partners and our peers and our friends. Many of you know that COS Systems has been, working hard for over a decade to bring scalable open access to the United States. We build software, we automate networks, and shared infrastructure is really at the heart and soul of what we do. I've been lucky enough to be part of this world for about the last 4 years and watch this journey grow in the US. And we're hoping today that you guys can get a little piece of what we've been seeing in the market. We have some incredible panelists and panels today for you. We're asking that they be interactive. Please ask questions. But more importantly, I really hope that you walk away today with learning something. We really feel that this is the future of the US broadband ecosystem. What we're seeing now is consolidation on the horizon. We've got overbuilders facing take rate challenges, and we've got new technologies of influence, which is going to be a very interesting panel that we'll discuss today. Converging networks really is the future of the US broadband market, and we hope today to paint you the picture of what that future looks like. And we believe that if we all work together and we can standardize and embrace this model, we can see great success in that. I said, as we always say at COS, dare to share. So, welcome.
Thanks, Ashley. A lot of familiar faces here. I think most people know me as well. My name is Isaac Feiner, the CRO at COS Systems. And today I will do the more boring part of keeping track of time. So I will be the one to tell you this time is over now, in the middle of the best discussion ever. And when you're out there having a coffee break, I'm going to stop doing the best discussion ever with someone interesting you just met. But that's just how it's going to be. I'm not going to walk through the entire agenda now, but I will sort of lead you through the day. I just want you to remember there will be drinks here between 5 and 6. Stick around at 7. We have the open access bar tonight, so make sure to get there. It's like less than 8 minutes in an Uber. So those who know me, they know I've been preaching about open access since I started traveling here back in 2012. And every year I've been saying it's coming. It's going to be a big thing. And actually now, the last year, I have a feeling this is becoming a big thing. But again, it's like when you're predicting the weather. If you say every day is going to be sunny tomorrow, eventually you get it right. So maybe that's just it. Anyway. I'm not going to keep you longer, but now when open access is really becoming the thing, I feel that the next step that is really important now is sort of getting some standards around this, and that is my segue into asking Sajan to get up on the stage. After him, Scott will be up, and they will present themselves because they do that much better than I do. And then it's going to be like a little fireside thing here. So they will sit there in the middle, they will take your questions on all the interesting stuff they just presented. So, Sajan.
Thank you, Isaac. They rejected my idea of us having a dump tank and having us throw stuff in there. This would have made it way more exciting. I want to start off by just kind of setting the stage for the day from a personal standpoint, but then moving up to how this works in a more broader sense, right? For those of you that know me, which it's such a pleasure for me to be in this industry for as long as I have, but I know so many of you. A lot of you know that my background has actually been in the wireless space. I've actually been pretty new to fiber in the last 4 or 5 years, but a decade plus before that was in wireless, especially in the tier 3 fixed wireless standpoint, right? And there's something interesting that happened in that space all the way even back then, where you always had these mom and pop ISPs, they would find neighboring boundaries, they would come up against each other, and in unlicensed spectrum, it was very easy to get nasty, right? Some of you know that, hey, I'm just gonna blast up the power on an access point and take down my neighboring ISP because I could. And there's a lot of turf battles, things like that. But the industry evolved, even back then. You get a little friendlier with your neighbors, you start maturing as a business, and what started happening is you started seeing people coordinate spectrum, right? You started understanding, hey, we're already over here, you're over there, let's just stay on our terms, and we'll use these frequencies, you'll use that frequency, and we'll make it nice with each other. All the antitrust connotations put aside, that worked really, really well for the longest time. But then those same neighbors became a lot more friendlier, and they started taking the business even further and growing even further, and they started realizing that, hey, I can actually provision a radio on a particular VLAN and actually give you a customer on my equipment and get it to your ISP. And this had no wording around it in that space, in that corner of this market. It wasn't called open access, it wasn't called shared networks, it was really just called, hey, I've got a company, it's 3 people, it's me and my wife, and you've got a company, it's you and your wife and a couple people. Let's help each other out grow onto each other's networks. So for me, personally, that was my first experience of how shared networks work, right? Or don't, because there were no operational standards. There were no systems in place on how you can sell things on different networks and have different brands share resources. Meanwhile, as I'm going to all those conferences over all that time, and there's a lot of conferences, we're here at Fiber Connect right now, but some of you know all the other conferences in this industry, there was always this Swedish company with a green booth and socks and candy, and they were always fun in the background somewhere. And that's COS. So when Isaac's been doing this since 2012, it's really interesting for me as an outsider back then, watching COS drive this mission with passion, right? Because they weren't really even selling a lot of that software that is on the table today way back then in the US. So back then it truly was, we want to come to the US, talk about open access, talk about what it's done for Sweden, talk about what it's done for society, and advancement of a lot of things. And back then, Isaac was telling everybody 80% take rates, right? Because that's what they saw in Sweden at the end. But after many years, what I have seen is this started getting adopted. And then, of course, our CEO, Mikael, if you haven't had a chance to talk to him, his experience driving and pioneering the actual execution and rollout of fiber and what it means to hit certain thresholds and ceilings and when opening up the network and having shared access makes tangible differences and makes or breaks the economic cases. He started becoming a little bit of a force in the US as well, and he's helped a lot of you folks in this room as well kind of work through your cases and shared networks as well. So, when we think about that, I guess the question is, why am I here on this stage today and not Isaac or Mikael? And this is the 3rd year COS has done Open Access Day, and it's amazing to see all of you, for some reason, choosing to spend your Sunday afternoon with us the week before a conference. But we're very grateful, and this is something it's a very meaningful thing for us. But the reason I'm on the stage today, opening this up for us, is, as Ashley mentioned, as Isaac mentioned, as I think is the reason a lot of you are here today, is there have been dramatic shifts in what open access is and what shared network resources mean just in the last 12 months. Not 2 years, not 3 years. The last 12 months have been insanely pivotal. And that's very fast. And this is all happening while AI is driving a lot of things. This is happening while market pressures are driving different forces as well. And we also all know that this has been validated to some degree as well. I don't want to point out the exact people in this room, but at this conference, but at the broader stroke, we all know that AT&T GigaPower announced their shared network pieces several years ago. We know how, I gotta get all the names right so I don't mix them up, but we know all the big players are going to shared networks, Verizon, T-Mobile, They have Lumos and Frontier in the space as well. So this is happening at the highest levels, and all of us are feeling it down here as well, the tier 2, tier 3 markets of this is the way it needs to go. The problem is, in the US, it doesn't exactly work the same as it does elsewhere. So we were not really able to adopt what has been successful in a lot of other parts of the world. Not one for one at least. There's different geography restrictions, there's different market restrictions, different constraints on how capital is raised and spent. And what happened is some of these failed, right? There's some notorious failures in open access and shared networks over the past 7-8 years in the US. And it became a little bit of a bad reputation, a bit of a dirty word of like, oh, that could never work, right? Who's gonna do that? Why am I gonna spend my capital and not reap the benefits of getting the margins of the service around it? It didn't make sense to a lot of people. And they didn't know how to do it. But that shift is happening now, I think, aggressively, because we're entering a phase, especially in the US, where there's not that much more land to develop new fiber projects in, not ones that make a lot of sense financially. So we've got a few different things coming together at the same time. On one hand, we've got capital investments that are still trying to reap the returns on existing deployments. And on the other hand, we don't have markets anymore they're not as big as they used to be, they're not as voluminous as they used to be. You can't find new places to really build fiber that makes a lot of sense. So everyone's capping out at their take rates today. I would be surprised if anybody in this room mentioned that they have a 78% take rate, right? We're all struggling to get past that 10, 15, 20, 30%. So one of the ways that everybody's coming to the same conclusions now is between existing projects and how new projects are thought about and funded, open access, shared networks are really the only way to get us to that 80% long term. Whether that's with 1 or 2 ISPs, or if we fast forward the clock like it is in Sweden, many of the folks in this room will tell you that there are 30, 40, 50 ISPs in a lot of markets. And everybody wins. Consumer wins, ISPs win, they get access to customers without really a huge capital uplift, and the network itself wins for that increased take rate. This is all happening at the same time that we have complete other pressures that I feel are going to change the landscape as well, again, in the next 12 months. Satellite internet is becoming a new player, right? LEO satellite, low latency. DOCSIS, I know not everybody, I'm going to be the crazy one this week talking about the next phase of DOCSIS, but I think the cable companies are going to have, at least from their perspective, a second wind by upgrading their CMTSs with DOCSIS 4. And then fixed wireless is another piece as well. So how all these pieces play together and affect the existing deployments and how we think about new deployments is going to be substantially different, I think, even in the next 12 months. The old model's not going to work. We no longer can find any just small underserved town and build fiber and try to repeat that. And these tier 1, tier 2 ISPs are hungry to grow even further. So when we think about the shift that we're going to drive today on the agenda, it's no longer, does this make sense, or what is this, right? Isaac, you're crazy, stop doing karaoke and talking about shared open access networks, right?
I will never.
It's moving away from that to, does it work money-wise? Can I make the business case? That, I think, has mostly been palatable and solved with some of the failures that we've seen and learned from in this country specifically. But now we're moving towards these real deployments that are actually happening. They're happening across millions of homes in the big space, but also in the small space. But in order to make this palatable, as we start eating up and consolidating and talking through how do you onboard ISPs, how do ISPs onboard themselves into more networks for everybody to win, realistically, there's a lot of lessons that everybody needs to learn. Even in places where around the world where this has been successful to some degree for a decade plus. There are lessons that we need to think about whose role it is at various stages of the operational life cycle. Who owns the customer? Who owns the address? Who owns the network? What's the demarc point, right? And how do you communicate simple things like addresses? How do you communicate appointment times? How do you communicate problems between these organizations in a way that subscribers are unaware? And those are now the things that everybody I think is thinking about. And over the next 12 months, I feel like once those items get solidified, we will accelerate open access because it will objectively become cheaper and faster to open up your network than try to capture that remaining 30-40% take rate on your own. So with that said, I'm gonna pause. I want to actually give the stage to Scott Baker from AT&T. Something that COS has so I'm the vice chair, but ATIS is an organization that has taken up an initiative for open access standards. And I want Scott to come up and introduce that as well, the good work that we've done.
All right, so as Sajan was talking here, and we were talking about open access, and as I've been in the lobby here coming out, I got the question a couple times, why is AT&T here, right? Why are we leading this, and where did this all come from? And I think all that comes from where we started with Gigapower. Sajan touched on this, but that was the first time where we had an opportunity where we could say, maybe you want to try something a little bit different. Maybe you want to, use a different model to reach a different market, to do a different thing. Now, our impetus behind this is very different than most of the OAPs, right? Our goal is to get as many homes passed as we possibly could, to expand our footprint, to be able to sell our products to more customers. And we first did that with Gigapower, and we realized through that, gosh, if we're going to do this 2, 3, 4 times over and expand the market, we can't just, this is not a bespoke integration. This has to be a standardized integration, has to be repeatable, has to be scalable. And what that grew into for us internally was trying to figure out how in the world we would write standards that hopefully would reduce the time and expense it took to integrate with these open access providers. Because for us, right, the important thing was if we're going to use this as a way to expand, we have to be able to do this in a way that is cost effective. The business case is always the driver for everything, right? And for me as a technologist, the business people, they go off, they figure out what the break-even points are. My perspective, my standpoint has always been, well, how do we technically make this work? And we did a lot of integrations, a lot of work on integrations. We did a lot of stuff that based off the TM forum work, the broadband forum work, standards bodies that existed out there. But when we put everything together, what we realized is we had all the pieces, and Sajan touched on, there's some things that are specific in North America than perhaps in Europe and other parts of the world. We had all the pieces from all these different players. We didn't necessarily have something that was put together, packaged together, that we could then give out to the other OAPs, the other ISPs even in the market to come up with an interoperable standard to reach the point that we wanted to get to. And that's really where ATIS came in for us. ATIS is a standards organization, pre-existing standards organization. It's done a lot of work in a lot of different spaces in the technology realm with stakes and board memberships from most of the major players, right? You've got AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, TELUS, etc., all involved in this particular organization. And they were a good partner organization to work with to come up with a standard. So as we started talking with ATIS and trying to figure out what we were going to do here, what grew out of that is the Open Access Forum. So this is a new ATIS initiative that just started this year. I think a couple of people in here are probably already members. Hopefully many more will be. The goal here is a little bit different than writing another standard, right? So we have a bunch of architectural principles that we have underlying this that basically say, we're writing a playbook. We know that there's good work that's already been done out there in the industry. We know that TM Forum, Broadband Forum, et cetera, have already done a lot of the legwork for how we would probably want these things to integrate, but they offer design choices that don't allow us to get to the point of interoperability. And to get to that vision of quick to integrate, low cost to integrate, flexible integrations, you have to make sure that when you come and you approach somebody, when you start making those negotiations between those parties, that you're talking the same language and that your systems have a way to interoperate. And so the driving force behind this forum is to create a playbook that defines the way that the data works, define the ways that the interfaces work, define the ways that the business processes work in such a way that we can achieve interoperability. And interoperability is really the holy grail here, right? In an ideal world, we would be able to use something like this, hopefully if it gets the traction that we want to in the industry in North America, to look a lot more like our European counterparts who have the ability to integrate, hundreds of ISPs with hundreds of OAPs and stuff of that nature. And that really changes the game, right? Right now, as we stand before the Giga Power, before some of the other OAPs that we've worked with, people look at these things as bespoke integrations in the US. I have my OSS, BSS systems, they have their system. Let's get in a room, let's figure out how all the APIs are going to work, where the process is going to work. There's no reason to do that every single time with every single business relationship. This is the playbook for the industry for how ISPs and OAPs are going to operate, that we hope, personally speaking, with my AT&T hat on, will allow us to reach more homes in America much more quickly. Important note here, this has already got pretty deep, broad interest from the industry. We've got Verizon as an active member, C Spire, TDS, Brightspeed, even TELUS. TELUS brings in a fun other dimension, being Canadian. They have their own take about the way all these things work because they have regulatory requirements we don't have in the US. But ONF is looking to solve for all of these and to provide a playbook that we can use in North America. I think.
Yeah, Lauren's here.
Yep, Lauren in the back here. If anybody has any questions, we do have Lauren from Addis here. We also have a QR code, so please scan it if you want to find out more information about this effort or if you want to join up with us to help define these standards. But we are really at the point of getting down to the nitty-gritty of let's write the playbook. Let's talk about what we mean by an address, which, as I think everybody here who's ever done an integration between these parties understands, is one of the most interesting and difficult conversations that you wouldn't think would have been if you were uninitiated. All right? Isaac?
Yep. So I'm not going to bore anyone, not right now at least, speaking too much. I just wanted to open up the floor for questions to these two gentlemen. We have about 10 minutes, then we're going to have a short 10-minute break before the next panel starts, or the first panel starts. So, any questions to these guys on standardization and where open access is now and where it's heading? No questions.
No questions. One morning. Can you define an address, or what are the multiple definitions of an address that you've run into?
gosh. Okay, the mic's good work. So, that's a very interesting thing. All I can say is be glad we're not in Ireland. Some of the worst addresses on the planet. But yeah, that's a problem because an address isn't a static thing, right? One of the problems that you have with new construction is, so and such subdivision lot 4 turns into 123 Main Street. And you have to track that over time, and you have to agree between both parties that you're actually talking about the same address. And there's no central clearinghouse in the US. You can't just say that USPS has it all, because they don't. They have a lot. They don't have all of it. So understanding how you're going to master that data and exchange that data in a way that you can have some kind of a common key at a data level is a fun conversation for a technologist.
Well, I'll take it a step further. So some of you know I just moved to Florida, and I still don't know my own address. I go to type it in, I type in my apartment number, and it always pops up that, wait, USPS thinks your address is this. And the only difference is that my apartment and sublocation is on address line number 1, not 2. So when you get into things like this, and two parties are exchanging information with just a very simple thing like that, across millions of homes, you end up with duplicates, you end up with a lot of different things where it's RD in one place, road in another, and who's gonna do all that? So you fall back to latitude and longitude. But that's not really perfect either, right? Because now, is it rooftop, is it driveway, is it where the NID's gonna be, right? And then if two neighbors have two NIDs at latitude and longitude on the same side of the house, then like, are they the same address or different address? So honestly, I think I'm just gonna vent just for 2 seconds and say, for all the projects that we've worked on together in this room, I think we all know that addresses has been the worst part of our relationship. So yes, what an address is not, we answered with nothing.
And who owns the data is important there, right? Who owns the address is a good part of the solution, big part of the solution.
Well, there's two parts to that, right? Because there's one part which is the network itself, and they have to designate that, hey, I can give you service at this place.
Right.
But then the retail service provider also has to be able to front that address towards a marketing and sales channel, and that may not be the same, right?
But you're talking about it as if an address is a binary thing. An address can be a combination of multiple data points, and with the advances in AI, it makes it simpler to use multiple data points to hone in on a single place.
Yeah, an address has many expressions, right? Whether that's lat long, postal address, polygons.
Network, I mean, you can
Yeah.
combine both. I mean, there are a lot of different things you can combine to get to an address.
Which is also the problem. It's a solution, but it's also a part of the problem too, yeah.
As an ISP, how do you know, this is Mike McCartney, Alex, how do you know what's available to you, like from a dark fiber perspective or just a fiber perspective that you want to be able to share? Is there a way to access that easily to build the network to where you want to get to? Or?
Yeah, so if I understand the question correctly, we're talking about if the open access network infrastructure owner, how do they communicate the addresses out to the ISP so they know what's sellable, what's not, and when? And realistically, that's part of the standards that we're trying to write, because today, if you buy or if you use any homegrown systems to manage your addresses, you have to figure out a way to get that data set to the ISP. And not only get it to them one time, but get it to them over and over again, because your build status is going to change. You're going to have new builds. 123 Main Street becomes, Memorial Drive or something like that, right? And it's the same record but different attributes. But then the standards are really what we're trying to drive to, which so that there's one way for ISP to expect addresses to be communicated to them across those lifecycle events.
And this is one of those points that's actually different between the Europe and the US and by and large, where we really want to have that address information as an ISP ahead of time for marketing purposes, because we're still building. And you go somewhere like the UK where everything is already overbuilt and they're more in a commodity market, and they don't really care. They're going to figure out which one of the 12 OAPs that serve this address is the cheapest today, right? It's a different concept.
But there's still the same problem if there's a consolation in Europe or other places in the world as well when it comes to address points. So
Yeah, addressing is always a problem.
that's always a problem. So I was building Qatar National Broadband many years ago. The only way we could define an address was by the serial number on the power utility meter. That was the only thing we could standardize around. So if you had a power meter, that means that you existed, and that was the only way we could define an address.
I love how you phrase it, means you existed.